All right, we've got time for talks about politics. We'll see who else shows up. But I do see that I've got my good friend Rick Rosner with me here, and I've actually got something to talk to him about as well. And all along those lines, I'll bring in Rick Rosner, and we'll see what's going on and what's taking place, and all along those lines. So great to have you here, Rick. How is your day going? How are things going in your world? And all along those lines, I was going to tell you that I just went earlier today. That's why I wasn't on the news show and everything, but I went to a presentation because we were considered community partners, meaning the Hayti Heritage Center, one of the places that I work at. So I actually went to NIEHS, which is a federal science research facility here in the Triangle Park. And I don't know if Kim, but I know Kim's in the back, but apparently she's not feeling all that well and everything. But they got some super tight security because they wanted to see my ID, which unfortunately I had forgotten and everything. But they were able to find somebody that knew me and got me through and everything. And then you had to go almost like going to the airport, going through the scanners and all of that, making sure that you weren't bringing anything harmful in to these folks that are doing major scientific research. And they were actually doing a presentation because I did hear part of y'all's conversation around the bias in law, but they're doing researches around some of the bias that exists in medical studies, including the genomes, which is the whole gene sequencing and all along those lines. Because apparently the most affluent of an African American might not do as well in some of these categories as the poorest of the European Americans and all along those lines.
Yeah,
So some of
I'm
the things.
familiar with bias. Like they look at my kidneys a lot,
Mhm.
and they still have two separate sets of numbers for white people and black people
Right.
based on one study from like 50 years ago um, that showed that a higher creatinine number isn't as bad for black people as it is for white people. I'm guessing that was based on the black people in that study being more muscular, because the more muscles you have, the higher levels of creatinine you're going to have in your urine.
Right.
But that was 50 years ago when everybody, white people, black people in America, everybody was skinnier on average. And now everybody's 72% of Americans are overweight. Or obese, and they're still relying on this study that is based on body types we don't have anymore. So yeah, they need to, there, plus there's gender bias that, they have more studies that measure stuff like that in men than women, and it leads to all sorts of misdiagnoses, underdiagnoses. Yeah, it's but
And that's part of what they were talking about. The young lady that was doing the presentation, this was all part of their Juneteenth celebration, but they were also talking about the nature of how sometimes the environment can impact things like you were just saying, Rick, and all along those lines. And one of the ladies even asked if they were doing any studies in the types of birth control and the types of things that people were doing, and even how it was being impacted based on where they were in the whole pregnancy cycle. Because they were even saying that sometimes our thoughts and things are imprinted as early as the time that we are nothing but placenta and all along those lines. So they were able to bring some of that up, how this science, and you are a super smart gentleman and everything, but they were talking about how a lot of the things that we carry on through life are developed when we are young babies in the placenta and all along those lines.
I don't know, but when my mom was pregnant, she was in the middle of breaking up with my dad. So I might have gotten PTSD as early as 0 years old. If her upsetness, was communicated to me in the womb.
Right.
But speaking of pregnant women, black women in America have higher rates of bad outcomes. We know because black women's complaints aren't taken as seriously on average. When they show up in the hospital, there's a stereotype that black people are better able to withstand pain. I mean, there are all these old attitudes, and thank goodness we are in an age where where medical information is said to double every 73 days. That at the end of a year, you'll have 30 times as much information as you did at the beginning of the year. Some of that information it's working with AI, and we're maybe going to get medically smarter, including eradicating some of the racial and gender bias.
And like I said, there was also environmental bias. They're talking about a number of biases. I'm hoping that I get a copy of the presentation to air here on Pride TV, and I know Kim and Nick will be glad on that, because it was a very colorful presentation, and it also brought in some quotes from, I think, both MLK and Abraham Lincoln and a number of others. But it was a probably 40 to 50-minute presentation, complete with Q&A and all along those lines. But I did have something I was going to bring up separate from that to Sasha and all along those lines, because I saw this, and we sometimes tease about Mr. Trump, but I saw this amazing post. I think it was on either Facebook or Instagram, and I'm trying to figure out, because y'all, both of you and Rick, sometimes, and I know Shaquille when he's here, have some high-end dinners and will eat high-end meals and everything. But apparently, because she wants people to believe in what Mr. Trump said about the no taxes on tips and everything, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think it was about 2 days ago, and there was actually a clip of it. I'm gonna see if I can find the clip of the receipt, but they didn't show what she was eating. But apparently she ran up a $600 tab by herself. I don't think she was with her other half, if she has a other half, and I don't think she was with anybody but herself. But she ran a $600 tab, and using the 20% rule, she put $120 tip on the $600 tab. And then she also said that on the tab on the receipt, she wrote, "Vote for Trump, no taxes on no."
Yeah,
no
I saw that. Good for her for tipping the right amount, even on a huge tab. I disagree with most of the stuff she says and does, but being a good tipper that's a good thing. Like, if you can afford to go out to dinner, you can afford to leave a nice tip. You can argue about whether or not tipping is a good system. Most other countries don't have this system, but we do here, and you got to play along. Don't stiff people.
I agree with you. Definitely don't want to stiff people and everything. But Sasha, you have, because we've had conversations offline before, and I know that you and your wife have gone to some nice fancy restaurants. I was talking to a friend of mine. We were speculating that maybe even if she had a good steak, that might have been $100, but the other $500 was probably on libations, either liquor or beer or wine or whatever else she might have been drinking. Because best I can tell, it was just her and this $600 tab. So even for the most affluent of people, $600 seems like a lot of money for one person to spend on a meal and everything. But you're in the investment space. What is your notion of her spending that kind of money, apparently in DC, on just one meal?
To me, it smells a lot like money laundering. You just run a huge tab and just put it as an expenses for whatever reasons might be. I don't understand how much she could eat to generate 600, or drink, or maybe the bottle of wine that she ordered cost maybe $500 could be. What's the purpose of it? I don't understand that.
I'm always a little ashamed with the tips I leave, because I used to have a boss who would tip like 50%, even on a gigantic tab. And I always, every time we go to tip, I'm thinking, what would he do? And I can't live up to that. I'm a little too cheap to tip 50%, but,
20% is more than enough. 50%, it's kind of exotic thing. It's not even cheap. It just
tips are showing up every place. We went to a fish store, and I bought a bag of salmon.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go to pay for it, and says, "What kind of tip do you want to leave?" And I go, "Well, I didn't leave any tip, because since when have we tipped the people who ring up our purchases?"
Well, if you're willing to leave tip, you don't even have to buy anything. I mean, somebody can stop you on the street and say, "Give me a tip of a couple of $100." So you might as well tip that person, because if he had guts to for money, it means something.
I have to step away for 1 second here.
Go ahead and step away and all along those lines. So go do what you got to do in all in that space. But yeah, it's just fascinating in that space.
Yeah.
He's still talking, so maybe I'll take him off. Oh,
Okay.
yeah, there he goes. I was making sure he was on mute, but I think Kim put him on mute and everything. Hey, what do you think about this notion? Because I brought it up on one of my other podcasts and since we were talking politics, but apparently today Biden was given legal protections to undocumented spouses of U.S. citizens. So if you are undocumented but you are a legal spouse, then you can actually get some protection. So that's something that Biden came down with, and I think he made the announcement earlier today. And there'll be several people that'll be glad that they now have this protection. So apparently it affects about 500,000 people, so almost 500,000 who have been living in the United States for more than a decade, but apparently they were living here kind of under the radar because their spouses were here. But now it looks like on Tuesday, Biden granted this far-reaching new protection for hundreds of thousands of immigrants who've been living in the United States illegally for years, but are married to American citizens. And I remember back in the day, you would hear people that would get married in order to get their citizenship papers and all along those lines. But I just wonder your take on this as one that is in Canada, but I know you follow some of the things in North America and in the United States as well.
Well, I'm surprised that it hasn't been done much earlier because logically, if the marriage is illegal, then how you can pretend that it's a legal marriage while one of the two is here illegally? So if that's the case, don't give them marriage certificate. It says that this marriage is impossible because your spouse is here illegally, and it's the end of story. But if you allow people to get married and get a marriage license, you might as well make them legitimate citizens.
Yeah, I mean, that's apparently what they're doing in this case. They're saying that this is one of the most expansive actions to protect immigrants since another act that a lot of folks, and particularly in the Trump camp, didn't like, which is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA. And that was enacted some 12 years ago. So that was enacted back in 2012 and all in that space. So, yeah, even what you're saying, Mr. Biden said these couples have been raising families, sending their kids to church and schools, paying taxes, contributing to our country. They're living in the United States all this time with fear and uncertainty. And he said we can fix that. So he was saying that he was even arguing that we're a better and stronger nation because of the Dreamers, as he marked the kind of celebration and the anniversary of that whole DACA conversation.
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. There was many years ago, there was an absolutely incredible case here in Canada, in Toronto, in fact. There was a Polish couple who came here illegally. Although I don't understand how you can come to Canada illegally. Maybe they came as visitors and overstayed their visitor's visa. Anyway, they stayed here for 7 years. They had 2 children born in Canada. They both have work. They bought a house. Yet, there was a hearing about deportation, both of them, back to Poland, because they came illegally and all that stuff. And there was a big uproar here to defend them as the de facto Canadian citizens, simply because it's happened de facto. They are Canadian citizens, they have jobs, they're paying taxes, they're married, they have children. So that by far should outweigh the fact that they came illegally or they overstayed their visitor's visa. And they didn't harm anybody, they didn't do anything illegal since then. So they stayed. The court, I think, appeal court, strike that deportation order, and so they were allowed to stay.
That makes a lot of sense. Hey, I know that this is the World Politics Show, but sometimes politics does get into economy as well. And I know that you'll probably be talking about this tomorrow on your investment show, but I did see some good news, as you are always talking about. But apparently, NVIDIA became the most valuable public company, topping both Microsoft and Apple. So for our listeners that are here on World Politics that might be wanting to think about getting into NVIDIA, can you explain how this all works and your thoughts around this? Because apparently, Microsoft and Apple used to be the top guns, but no longer. Is now all about NVIDIA.
Yeah, a few years ago, NVIDIA was a joke compared to Apple and Microsoft. and several other companies, by the way. NVIDIA was, it was perceived, okay, it's high tech, it's innovative, and so on, but it was just one of quite a few companies. What's happened is that they've developed a product without which today almost no artificial intelligence business cannot function. So if you want, and the most valuable companies on the market, such as Microsoft and Salesforce, and just almost anybody, they all use, even Elon Musk endorsed, they're all using heavily NVIDIA's products, and there is none that is compatible to, or comparable rather, to NVIDIA product they developed. And that cycle could go on for probably at least a year, if no longer. And they're always innovative, and they already announced, not announced, a few weeks ago, that they will innovate their product once every year. So it's not a cycle that you got their product, now you can sit on it for 3-5 years or so. No, you will have to buy their next line of products a year from now. So this is absolutely incredible story, and stock just plays along with it.
Yep.
It's close today, I think $134, and it's after 10-to-1 split, which also contributes to their success story, and their volume is extraordinary. They're trading well over 200 million shares a day. So liquidity is there enormous, and because it's 10 times cheaper than it was before, never mind that there are now 10 times as many shares. But people don't care how many shares there are. They're saying, okay, I have, say, $10,000. How many shares can I buy? So before, you couldn't buy even 10 shares. Now you can buy almost 100 shares. Now a little bit less, but still, it's much more affordable.
Well, speaking of that, I know that something else that people are very excited about. I was just talking to a friend earlier today that has one and everything, but apparently there's another war that is going on internationally because of the EV tariffs. So apparently there are some people that are wanting to place tariffs on EVs, and now China is threatening pork imports from Europe. So it looks like they are targeting the European farmers in response to there being tariffs on the EVs. I was just wondering, is this back and forth going to work? And does Europe need to think that they're going to be having to pay extra for that hot dog that they want, and all along those lines? Because apparently the Chinese government is launching retaliatory pork probe in response to the EV taxes. So it looks like we're having a tit for tat in terms of tariffs versus taxes and all along those lines. But what is your take? Because you are definitely one that is following these kind of stories on a regular basis.
Mark, it's a little bit more complicated than that. It's the evil of the world, which represents China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, fighting all civilized countries, so-called golden billion. You can call it any way you want. And they are determined to have their pound of flesh from the golden billion. And so far, it's not a dangerous situation, but the longer it goes, and see, the West doesn't have that goal absolutely destroy the economies of these rock states. They just want to play alone and have normal lives, the quality of life, and so on. But it's not the evil, the the evil empire. You can call it anything you want. I wouldn't say that the people there are evil, because there are all kinds of people. There are people who are really pushing ahead this agenda to inflict as much damage on the rest of the world as possible. There are people who are actually suffering because of these actions of this, their leaders and so on. So unfortunately, of course, the leaders are the ones who dictate the politics, And that's what's happened. And West has to get ready for a long war against this evil. It's going to be 5, 7, 10, or I don't know, whatever years. And that's going to be, it's, you can call it second Cold War, probably, but it doesn't make it any easier on anybody.
Hey, Kim, glad that you joined us. And yeah, I do have to do the Saint Sia show, Mama Noni, at 6 o'clock, but I can definitely help you in this space for a while and all along those lines. But definitely one of the other things that I saw in the news that was interesting on the political landscape, and I don't know if Sasha may have some thoughts around this, and definitely whenever Rick comes back, he may have some as well. But it looks like Thailand is going to become the first Southeast Asian nation to legalize a same-sex marriage. And I know that yesterday, part of the reason for not being on that show was I had to go talk to some diplomats on that came from all over the world, including you'll be glad to know this, Sasha. One of the diplomats was from Belarus, and I know that you've got some ties to that area as well and everything in that space. And they actually told me something interesting that I think Kim might find interesting as well, because there was and I'll explain that in a second. But I just wondering y'all's thoughts around this, because one of the things that came up even in talking to these human rights activists from around the world was the fact that even when these laws are passed, a lot of times the citizens don't necessarily approve of the laws, and sometimes they are very adamant in what they do against some of the people that they feel are going against their way of life, whatever their way of life may be and everything. But I just wanted your take when we've got folks like Thailand and there have been other countries, including European countries, that have legalized same-sex marriage, but sometimes those people that are in those relationships find themselves being targeted by certain citizens.
Well, personally, I don't think marriage should be part of, that's just religion, state issues. I'm totally against any law that prevents anyone who decides to marry someone else to get married. I mean, it's no one's business but between the two of them. That's just two souls who want to get married. It shouldn't matter whether it's same sex or not. All of this is more about religion and about politics and gaining votes whenever they try to use these things. Just let people be people, right? If someone wants to marry someone, let them marry them. I think there should be an age limitation and not older, but I don't think anyone under the age of say 18, because of what our legal adult age is considered here. But again, I just think that the politicians and the laws, but you know what? If you have to have a law to say same sex can get married, then by God, make a law that says it. But we shouldn't. That should not participate in any legal matter at all. That shouldn't be. If it's two adults who consent, who are happy, willing to stay married, be married. I mean, the way I look at it, why even get married? So many people get divorced nowadays. Again, it's all politics. And I want to go back to your beginning about the tips. I think that that's just a political run for Trump. I mean, no, you shouldn't say no tax on tips. And let me tell you why. Now I don't even want to tip. And I'll tell you something else. I've traveled all over the world, and other countries don't expect tips. Their employees all get paid very well. Tips are just like a bonus check. Here, you served me very well, and I want to thank you for it. But that should not be part of my deal package of buying a meal or getting a massage or getting a haircut. All of that should be priced into that professional package. But a tip should just be nothing more than a bonus. And when I'm in other countries, they don't require tips.
And I agree with you, Kim. And what I found is so offensive is that now wherever you're going for haircut or restaurant or anywhere, they're now when they're issuing the bill for paying by credit card, they put amount of tip, 20%, 18%, 15%, and I don't know what else. And neither. Okay. When I see that, I immediately check neither. And then I can tip some cash if really was good service and I'm happy, I can pay some cash. But I don't want to have the mandatory tip imposed on me. Absolutely not. I refuse to do it.
Well, something else that's happening in our country, and I'm not sure about other countries, but the owners of restaurants are no longer paying the tips that are put on credit cards. They don't pay the employees that anymore. They give them a credit card, deduct stuff out of it to begin with, and by the time they get the tip, it's not what they really earned that day. So I agree with you. Many times I'll put neither, and I always carry enough cash. I don't want to get mugged. I carry enough cash to tip people with. But I think it's wrong to sit there. I hate that little thing. And like some of them turn away when you're sitting there checking, right? And so it's embarrassing to everyone. And, they need to do away with it. And again, when I was in another country, that wasn't even part of anything. There was no tip at the bottom of the cashier thing or anything. And I always just left a cash tip anyway. But other countries, they pay their employees what, part of the package deal, what they're worth. And I think that our country needs to ante up. We need to start doing that. And I think Trump was just using that to get as many of the people's votes as he can from that industry, which there are a lot of people in that industry. And
actually, what I want to mention is that, here in Ontario, we have HST tax. Okay, it's 13% from the total. So what they're doing in restaurants, your bill is, say, $500. Okay, now they put HST, in this case, it's going to be, I believe, $65 or so. So they put 500 plus 65, it's 565. And then they expect tip of 20% of whatever you mark that you are willing to pay, not on total what your bill is, 500, but total plus tax, HST. And from that total, they want to add yet another 20%. How, I mean, it's insane that you are going to pay a tip on a tax. That's incredible. I mean, if you are in a mood and you had a few drinks and you don't care, you can tip $500 and just get on. Okay, but if it's a normal dinner and if you're eating out 4 or 5 times a week, then it adds up quite a bit. If you're paying tip on tax, you can pay tips on. It's incredible. I found it also.
I added up my trip to New York, and a lot of cities now, and San Francisco, a lot of cities now have the mandatory tip, which I don't like. And in other words, you can't even say, no, I'd rather leave cash. They mandatory tip. So like you were saying,
it's illegal, right?
What?
It's illegal.
It's not illegal, and those states have approved it. So I added up, and I felt like I was tipping more than I was paying for the things I wanted on my trip. But I am a good tipper. In general, if someone does me really good, takes care of my luggage or, whatever, and it's not a big fee related, I usually tip somebody generously, but I don't like all of this mandatory tipping that they're doing. I think it was in San Francisco. Majority of the places, they have a sign on every menu and on the window, we are mandatory tip included with meal, period.
But this is misrepresentation. All they had to do just raise their prices for food.
There you go.
Tips, and our food is more expensive than others. We have exceptional food and great service, and therefore it's more expensive. But what they're saying is, it costs so much, but anyway, whether you want it or not, you still have to pay that much. It sucks.
No, and I don't like that either. I mean, I agree with you. Raise the prices on the food and pay the people the amount they need to be an employee to survive. Because, my sister's in lending, And a lot of people who are relying on tips for their wages can't get a mortgage. They can't get a loan for cars. They can't get a loan because it's not reliable income. But if we raise the pay rate for these employees, I think it would be better for everyone. That if I were running for president, I would say exactly what you said, Sasha. I would say, just increase the price of the service and the product.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
maybe there are some games what they play with taxes. Maybe they pay separate taxes for food sales and separate taxes, or maybe they don't pay taxes for the tips, which are mandatory yet. And so they simply split tips with waitresses. I hope so. Or maybe they just pocket it and just keep it to themselves. I don't know how it works. Really.
Well, the sad thing is now majority of the tips that are paid with credit card are put into a system, and the employer of the restaurant will then pay his employees with a split tax on a credit card that is given to them. They don't even get the money or the cash to deposit in their bank account. They're given a credit card. And I think that's wrong. It's just wrong. If anything, he should give them cash so that they could go deposit it in their bank account. And the reason why I say cash is a lot of people who are working in the service industry like that don't even have like a place that can call their home, so they can't get a check. That's been a big problem for a lot of the people. They're just trying to get their feet off the ground, and not having an address means they can't get a check. So if you don't have an address that is called your home, and you go to get a job, because you need a job to make money so that you're not homeless, you can't get a job in this country. It's just, we've got the most. So if I were president, those would be the laws I would change, right? I would fix it.
But Kim, it's not just here either, though, because apparently earlier today and everything, there was a lot of protests in the Kenyan capital of Nairobi because they had a finance bill that many felt would significantly raise their already elevated cost of living by adding new taxes and increasing others on a wide range of goods and services. So after the protesters protested, they then decided to drop some of the taxes, including a tax on a very basic staple to many people's diet, namely bread, because they were going to have a new tax on bread, and now they have dropped it. And some of the opposition lawmakers are saying that this is nothing but a PR exercise, the fact that you're going to drop the tax on bread in that part of the world. So it sounds like this issue of taxes and even how to handle taxes and how to lower costs is not just here in the United States, but it is in African nations, European nations, and other places as well, because they were even talking about having taxes and levies in that country that would increase the cost on bread, diapers, and cars. So there's all things that seem like things that you might need in your life and everything, but they were going to have these taxes, and they apparently dropped some of them and all in that space. But just really quickly, I did have a question for Sasha, based on what the young lady told me and everything, and I had never heard this. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, and maybe you can tell me, because you did have some time in this particular part of the world and all along those lines. But when I was talking to the lady from Belarus, she was telling me that there is kind of like we talk about the Bloods and the Crips, that there is this notion of the way that color is done even there, like the color in the color scheme and all in that space. Because I was showing a video, or not a video, but a stained glass image of a big tycoon type here in Durham, that being Mr. Duke, that helped found at Duke University, and it's more prominent than the stained glass of Jesus Christ. And she pointed to the stained glass of Jesus Christ and said, because I think in this particular image he was wearing like some red or some very bright color, and she said if he was wearing that in my country, he would be in jail. So I guess y'all have, or at least some parts of you.
Oops. So I hate that the question didn't come out.
That's a fascinating story.
That is an interesting story. But there's so many other things going on in politics, and I feel like that they always use abortion, anti-abortion, or and all of that, and they play the people against each other with these policies. And I really think that these are things that really have nothing to do with our government. The government needs to butt their nose out of it. But recently they were pursuing a law, and majority of the Republicans voted against it, but it was for the right to access birth control and contraceptives, that women will not have the right to have access to birth control and contraceptives. And I just think that why are they so adamant about that?
Well, as a joke, I suggest that people like Trump, they want as many people to be born in the society, and because there is a sucker born every minute, and
There you go.
and to sell
That's
them.
a good one. I would have never thought of that, Sasha.
Yeah. So
That
they
is
want more
excellent.
and more suckers around who will buy his products and his what's he selling now?
There's a sucker born every minute.
Yeah, I think his stock DGT is for suckers only, and the more suckers there are, the more people will keep buying his stock and donate his money to him and so on. So I really don't see anything else. And now, coming to question of marriage, I was at one point I investigated the Institute of Marriage, which has thousands of years history or so. And essentially, if you remember when there were tribes and they were basically a polygamian way of life most of the times, and there was a strong leader of the tribe and all others were around him or so on. So eventually when institution of marriage came, the only purpose was to raise a family, to be around the family. So the family would help you to work if it's a farm or whatever enterprise you may have. And also there was a purpose, the more kids you have, the purpose was that when you are getting old, you'll never be alone, your children will help you and so on. Now, it's all changed, of course, with industrialization, and now you don't need your children to help you out. You can do it on your own, provided that you have enough savings, capital, or whatever. So now, for example, the same-sex marriages, the children is not even an issue anymore unless you adopt children. But you can adopt children even if you're not married. You can.
Well, that's not 100% true, because I have many friends and friends and family who are same-sex marriage, and like the women, they get pregnant, and the men, they have a surrogate. So there are ways, but adoption isn't a bad thing. We have a lot of children that are now going to be born who aren't wanted. And so, maybe that it goes hand. Maybe that's why Trump's administration is doing this, so that the same-sex marriage couples can get a child that is in an unwanted situation. I don't know, but I like your suggestion of a sucker born every minute. I wanted to share something with you, Sasha. I made these through Pod TV just for you. It's Serving in America, President for Trump, the first president to be a convicted felon. He will be serving you in America, whether it's behind bars or in the White House. I don't know if you can see them or not.
Yeah, I can see a nice merchandise, and what can I say?
So this will be made available tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh, very nice. I'll tell you that there is essentially, if that's the case, that he will be elected president, there will be very blurred lines between White House and the jailhouse. It will be almost one is continuation of the other. That's really
Well,
bizarre.
apparently his followers seem to believe that he's innocent enough. And even though he is a convicted felon, he's going through the appeal process. And, like Nick said, it doesn't matter. He can still run for president. So we shall see. But I kind of like that idea of serving in
Yeah.
America.
I'll tell
And
you, Rakim, before I leave, I want to tell you something that, you see, this message of non-stop grievances about election was stolen. The crooked judge convicted me, and another judge put me up for payment for $500 million, and everything is not right, and all institutions are corrupted. This has to be stopped one day. And the only way I can see that could be stopped is by delivering sounding defeat of Trump and therefore Republican Party. But I care much more about Trump. The Republican Party, whatever they do, is fine. They will have to start from the scratch anyway, because they made Trump the front flag bearer of the Republican Party, and right now they're inseparate. So if, for example, what would happen, that Trump would be beaten decisively, but Republicans will remain in running for the House, not necessarily win, but at least to have enough seats to have some say in what's happening, Senate the same, the governorships, and so on. So that will clearly show that even Republican voters, they are okay with Republican Party, their platform, and so on, but they can't stomach another 4 years of Trump. And this is actually what happened in 2020. Remember that they did very well in the Senate. They didn't get control, but they done 50%, and they got control of the House. But
that's
Trump,
right.
but Trump lost. You see, so so there were probably enough people who voted, and they voted for Republican congressmen and senators, but they refused to vote. At least enough people refused to vote for Trump as a president. So we'll see if that will take place this time, and I believe that it could be, because I think all the battleground states as they are, I think, and women, and with abortion issues and everything else, I don't think that Trump will win the presidency so easily. Maybe he will lose, actually.
I agree with you. I think the only way to end all the nonsense going on back and forth is to probably show a huge defeat. But I don't think that's going to happen because of the amount of just pure hate and angst amongst people nowadays. Now and again, I heard this today among the youth, is, these adults that we have left us with no future. And all they do is vote for the person they least like, that they are, and they can't pick this is what I hear. You can't pick a good candidate for president. You've left us no economy worth, working in. There's nothing left for you if you go to college. I mean, these are the things that our president should be listening to and fixing. And instead, he's going around and going, no taxes on tips. And, I forget what Biden said the other day, but, sometimes I forget what he says because he bores me so much. But even what he said made no sense. And I'm sitting there shaking my head, remembering, okay, why do I want to vote for him? Why can't we get everybody to vote for another person completely? And, and again, the youth is going, and look at you guys, you're repeating the same dumb mistakes you made 4 years ago. Okay, fine. Maybe we need to eliminate ourselves from the factor, because we are the problem. The people are the problem, not the presidents. That's what we have to understand. We are the problem, not the president.
All right, so Trump can't win the
I
popular.
have to say goodbye to all of you.
Hey, Sasha, you're going to have to get one of those mugs.
Yes. Very
Take
good.
care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
So Trump can't win the popular vote. In 2016, when people thought he might be okay as a president, he still lost by almost 3 million votes. He won the Electoral College. After 4 years of Trump, and a disastrous 2020, he lost by 7 million. So even at his best, more people are going to vote against him than vote for him. But if he could still lose the popular vote by 5 million and squeak by in the Electoral College.
I think it's all going to be based on the economic situation near the election, because people have such great short-term memory. And I think that the Federal Reserve is the swing vote. I've been saying that for the last year. I just heard Powell mention that, and it's been on the news too. So this is nothing new, but that they will lower the interest rate one time this year.
That's what I've heard too. And Sasha thinks it'll be in September. If it's in September, that would be decent timing to not have Trump get elected, because it would goose the stock market a little bit.
It will.
But this is a weird election in that we knew both of these people have been president before. I don't know when the last time that happened was. Maybe Grover Cleveland 130 years ago. But we've known who the major nominees are going to be for 7 months. 7 months before the election, we've known for more than 2 months. And usually you don't know until later this month, later in June. So it's weird, because it seems we're in the general election, but the general has started earlier than ever before. And we think we know how it's going to go based on polling, but we still have almost 5 months to go. And that's a long time for people to, start paying attention. And if you pay attention to Trump and you pay attention to Biden, you hear that Trump is full of nonsense. And you hear that Biden, he does things that annoy me. Like he says, "I'm not kidding," like every other sentence. I'm not kidding, folks. He's got these verbal tics. But if you listen to the content of what he says, he generally makes sense. And he's generally for things that most Americans want. And Trump does not really give a crap about what most Americans want. So I'm hoping that makes a difference.
He reminds me of the high school guy running for president that just tells you what you want to hear.
Yeah,
right.
And his tax on tip thing, initially to me, it's like, oh, that's exciting. I ran for student body president in high school. And I ran against an imaginary candidate. Some guys who were funny just invented a candidate to make fun of the whole thing. And that guy's whole platform was free ice cream. And
he won.
Biden loves ice cream. He should offer free ice cream to everybody.
I think that there are more things we need to focus on, like our healthcare system. It's not so much the healthcare system, but it's the insurance, or the insurance you think you have to buy sucks. The whole mechanism to be able to afford healthcare doesn't exist. It doesn't. I watched my son struggle. He, graduated from college last year. He's a teacher, not the kind, he's not yet into where he can get the benefits. So he has to buy his own insurance. And if you miss a certain window, then you get screwed out of it. So, and he did hit the day, he hit the window and everything, but they came back and told him that day when he hit submit, "Oh, you qualified for this, so we're eliminating this," and then they cheated him. So it was.
I don't think that's high on people's list of concerns. You got immigration, and you have employment, but like Obama screwed up hugely in that for 10 or 11 months. I think Obama had a 60 senator majority which is you need 60 in the Senate to be able to do what you want. And Obama spent that whole time where he had that, the biggest majority in years, he spent it all on Obamacare.
Yeah.
That's the only thing he got pushed. It took a huge push. There was huge resistance. And, he could have done a lot of other stuff. He maybe could have done, worked on the immigration reform or a couple other things, but it took all that time to get healthcare reform. And this time around, healthcare is not people's, number one concern. And like Biden, the border is people's concern, and Biden is doing quite a bit with that now. And he maybe could take a look at, he could do free ice cream with regard to inflation. He could do an executive order that everybody in America gets like a check for $800 to help with inflation. He could do that 2 months before the election, and the Republicans would go crazy saying he's just buying votes. And yeah, he would.
Yeah, there you go.
But he would be just buying votes. But I'd rather have him buy votes than have Trump get back into office.
Well, Trump was doing that too when he was sending out the checks to people during COVID.
Yeah.
And then behind the check, like 2 days later, I get a letter from him almost saying, you should thank me for this. I'm the one who did that for you. And by the way, donate, da, 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 da. And I'm like, I'm not donating a penny of this to anyone.
I think they started printing the checks and Trump said, hold it, and recalled the checks before they went out and had them reprinted so they had his name on them.
Yeah.
And
I mean, he did. He had them all. And so that was a waste of money. I mean, he is a waste of breath. But, the oxygen that we breathe, he's a waste of. But I get so bent out of shape when I see all of that. I want to play something. I don't know if you saw this the other day, if I can find it. Oh, it's on my other link. But, Dr. Phil interviewed Trump. And then he did the town hall meeting afterwards. And the last question to him was about the economy and about COVID causing it. And I think the girl was hitting around to, was it because of COVID or this? And he said, that's a conversation you don't want to get in with me. But the president wrote out $5 trillion in checks, of which $4 trillion were put into savings accounts that were not needed. And then it was waived. They didn't have to pay it back. And that is what caused us the problem. And if I would vote for my dog if he promised flat rate tax, because just like he knows, and I know, math isn't that, math can be difficult, but a flat rate tax wouldn't be that difficult. But all of these, tax the wealthy, you know what? You can add a 50% wealth tax on the wealthy. They're not going to have to pay a dime because of all the deductions they get. Okay. All the tax write-offs they get. This is what I tell people. Yeah, you can say that all you want. Trump can sit there and wave that flag all he wants, but it doesn't impact them. They just sit there and laugh.
Well, people with good accountants and lawyers will come up with tricks.
Yeah. That's just a falsified profit promise. That's all that is.
But I do have a question that I was a little confused about and everything. I'll get to the question for Sasha later, but it was about color differentiation. But I'll get to that the next time I see Sasha. But my question for everybody is, wasn't Trump impeached? Because I'm actually surprised that he can actually run, because he was actually impeached in the past and everything, because he was actually impeached under the last run and everything. So I'm sometimes surprised.
Impeachment has two parts. The House, if a majority of the House says you need to go on trial, but then, you're impeached. But then you go on trial in the Senate, and it takes 2/3 of the Senate to vote you out of office. And so twice he was impeached, but no president who's ever been impeached has ever been voted out of office.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, Kim, just really quickly, because I think he was on the phone before and everything, but I think that Rick needs to see those lovely cups and everything, and then we get ready to do Mama
Oh
Noni shortly.
yeah. Let
But I
me
want to
share
say one
this.
thing about taxes really quick. In the 1960s, the highest tax rate, if you made on any money more than $1 million, it was 91%. So Elvis, if he made $2 million on that second million, he would have to give the government $910,000 of it.
Oh wow.
But rich people had a zillion tax shelters to hide that money from the government. So people will always, find ways.
Yeah, let's see if I can. For some reason, it's not
All right, so
behaving like.
it's Trump behind bars.
Anyway, so you can get this only on Pod TV, Serving in America, because I feel like he's going to be serving in America, whether he's behind bars or in the White House, and he will be the first president ever convicted of a felon. So get your mug today, folks.
So that's right, that he's been found guilty of a bunch of felonies, but it's not till he's sentenced that he's officially convicted.
Oh, is that the loophole?
I think that's how it works. I think it may be that you're not even, that if you file an appeal, you might not even be convicted until the appeal's done with. I don't know how it works.
I don't either, but unfortunately, we're at the top of the hour, and this conversation is going to have to wrap. Rick, thank you for this wonderful conversation, and we will see you guys Thursday on World Politics at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.